Well, good evening and welcome back to Wednesday Night Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley, gateway to the great Northwest. We're glad you could join us tonight. We have a lot to talk about. Needless to say, there's an awful lot going on right now about what's happening in the Middle East with the attacks on the ISIS cabal, if you will, and the things that are happening, and the little extra things like the commander-in-chief, as he just kind of casually saluted his Marines while holding his latte. You know, you can't be too, you don't want to make too much of a salute to the Marines, or any other military for that matter. But I get ahead of myself. So welcome to our program. As I do every week at this time, I would like to remind you about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478-HOPE. 208-478-HOPE. This is a small operation whose basically exists as the counterpart to Planned Parenthood. In other words, babies have hope and their mothers get compassion. If you can help them, I would ask you to please call 478-HOPE. They could use your financial help or any other help that you might have to offer. One dear lady has offered sewing classes for young mothers. This is something that was once taught in home ec classes. I don't think they even have home ec classes anymore. It's probably a lost art in some homes. So you'd be surprised at the things you could offer that they may be able to make use of. 478-HOPE. I think you'll be glad you did. Some expectant or new mother will certainly be glad you did. And a baby that was able to be born will eventually be glad you did. So God will bless you for this. Today is Rosh Hashanah Eve. And I'm going to just read this to you rather than try to work my way through it. A friend of mine supplied this for me, and it's just briefly Elul, E-L-U-L, the month before the new year is halfway over. During this month, Jews have traditionally thought about their lives, what they did during the past year and what they hope to do in the coming year, the things we have done which we regret, and the things we determine not to do again. This month's focus is probably the origin of New Year's. So we are going to have a lovely Shabbat dinner this Friday as part of the overall Rosh Hashanah leading into Yom Kippur, which we're looking forward to. So to all of my Jewish brothers and sisters out there, I say Shana Tova, or a good Gebenchtjahr. So probably mispronounced the daylights out of the second one was in Yiddish. I'm a little weak on my Yiddish, even worse on my Hebrew, but I think those of you who care will know what that means. Well, tonight we're going to continue, as I promised last week. If you haven't already seen it, last week we showed the first segment of a four-part program where Brett Baer from Fox News interviewed three of the survivors from the Benghazi debacle. I say debacle not because of these three men. These men are heroes, and you'll see why. But the debacle has to do with the Obama government, the Clinton State Department lack of leadership, and whatever you want to call it. So, but it pretty much explains itself. Now, last week we had the first segment, which was titled "The Beginning," and it just kind of introduced you to these three men, two Marines and one Ranger. And as I told you before, once a Marine, always a Marine. There are no former Marines, and once a Ranger, they always lead the way. There are no former Rangers. So, I hope you will find this interesting. I just got the book yesterday. 13 Hours in Benghazi. I'm very eager to get into it. One of the things that I think you will, I believe it's mentioned toward the end of this program. If not, I will just mention it. These men actually quit their jobs with the State Department because they don't have a political agenda. They're not politicians, but they got so sick and tired of seeing all the fabrication and just falsities coming out of the White House and every place else, the pundits and every place else, about what really happened there, that the only way that they could tell the truth and tell you what they experienced there, because they had signed a non-disclosure contract, was to basically leave their careers. And so they did. They left their careers so that they could tell us what really happened at Benghazi. Not the political part, not the what difference does it make now Hillary Clinton stuff, what really happened there. So Josh, are we tuned up on segment number 2? Please watch this. I think you'll find it interesting.
While they were jocking up, Ron calls me on the cell phone, tells me, you need to get back to base. and just stay away from the consulate.
So you tell the case officer, we gotta wrap up this day.
Yeah, she's trying to say her goodbyes, and I'm like, we need to go now. And like any good case officer, she's trying to gather information on what's going on. Then I just looked at her and said, you know what, you're in my world now, you need to be quiet, because let me do what I need to do.
Now, you have been back on the compound in the annex for a while. You said before you felt like you wanted to be with your team, but you also knew you had a job to do there.
I knew I was the only one. I mean, we had two site security officers. They were a great help, but from the GRS side, I was the only one that was there.
The DS guys come back first.
Yes.
The armor car held up, but they roll in.
Yeah, I could hear when they were leaving, they announced it over the radio, and then I heard tons of gunfire and knew kind of where they were at just from the direction. And then all of a sudden they're calling that they're coming in.
Hot.
Coming in hot, which means they're coming in fast.
Have the gate ready.
Have the gate open. You hear that flop, flop sound of the tires just, you know, they're on run flats, but you still hear that sound coming through, and both sides and the front windscreen were all shot up. You could see the relief on their face once they got in. Scott got out. He looked like a chimney sweep. He was still black almost from head to toe. I told him to get inside, get some medical help. The other guys asked what they could do, and I told them to get up on the various buildings. And we had one get up on each one of these buildings here, and I went back up on this building until our guys come in. They knew where they needed to go. So each one of them went to their pre-positioned or pre-planned positions. Jack is up on this roof, Roan's up here.
Yeah, Tano and DB are on.
Tano and DB are here. Tig is over in this corner initially, and I'm over in this corner over here.
You guys are exhausted.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, some of you probably have smoke inhalation, and you're preparing maybe for another fight.
But now, we know, just gut feeling we're going to get attacked, and my adrenaline went back up. And so
Well, it wasn't long after they had showed up, you start hearing tires screeching over in this area. And we started asking over the radio to the TL if Feb 17 is coming over to assist us. And then the response was, they're not sure. So we immediately assumed that anything that's coming in is coming in that are bad guys.
I asked the status of the Spectre gunship, and the teamer came across the radio and said, hey, you know, checking on it. And that's the last time that I got an actual answer if one was, we're going to get any support or not.
I was expecting at least some kind of air support, even if it was just a flyover by a jet or whatever.
Sometimes that's all it takes. It gets the bad guys down.
And no doubt that would have been nice.
I want to put this back up here just so you can describe what's outside the annex that you're most concerned about.
The stockyards, yeah, stockyards, and this is very, lot of concealment. There's a lot of bushes and small trees in this area, and this is what we call zombie land, basically, this whole area here.
Most of the activity we're hearing is coming over from right at this intersection.
Yep, they're starting to stage here in this whole area. This is just a big open parking lot. And here's the house that we're seeing people start to go into that little area.
And they can come into here, and it gives them access to our back gate.
So you're watching this develop in these cars and the people going into this house that you don't really know if it's bad guys or not. And what's the engagement? You're going to wait till they fire on you?
Wait until we see action from them that specifies them being attacking us or going to attack us. I'm not going to wait to get hit before I hit back. We start seeing movement coming from this direction through the night vision goggles.
The caveat here is this house had kids in there that would actually come and pester us every once in a while. You just didn't want to open fire. You didn't want to. I don't want to shoot somebody that doesn't have it coming to them, and it's definitely don't want to shoot a child. They were starting to move up on us, and I remember DB says, "Hey, I got movement."
Are you lasing them?
Oh yeah, I've got my laser, and I am lasing targets and saying, guys, I'm picking out targets, people I see, and I got on the radio with Oz and Tig. I said, you seeing what I'm seeing? And he goes, yeah, I got your laser.
Now, can they see it?
No,
No.
only with night vision.
At this point, when they're moving up, I mean, in my mind, they're getting ready to be, we're going to engage them. We're just going to let them get as close as possible and then take them out. The first thing they fired was a RPG, and it went flying over the compound.
Came over our myself and DB's head.
I was bringing water over to Oz. I got about right here, about the corner of the gym, when a gelatina.
It's a huge flashbang.
Yeah, it's a homemade explosive.
So it goes off. It hit right here, just inside.
So then what
I
happened?
to me, it was just, okay, it's on, and we just started fighting, started lighting them up. And I was just lasing targets, lasing targets, and shooting them.
The firefight starts. What does that look like?
It's gorgeous, man.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's a green hue, and with the lasers dancing back and forth from target to target, you see 3-4 sets of lasers just bouncing back and forth, taking out targets, and you'll see a flash of light, which is the enemy shooting at you, and hear the rounds going past your head, and you're just re-engaging in those spots.
Anybody take a hit?
Yeah, me and Tig were up on this, in this corner, and they were trying to shoot out the lights, and secondary from one of the rounds hitting the wall, or one of the lights splattered up into my face and cut me across the top of the bridge of the nose.
So you push back, you obviously take down a lot of people, and it stops.
To me, and that's how I explain it, it's hey, we won that game. All right, good deal. Morale goes up. I think all of us could feel it, that it still wasn't over yet. That was just the probe. That was just they're going to see our defenses, and they're going to be coming back with a bigger force, because that's what we would do.
But there's a big break there then.
Big break.
2 hours?
Yeah.
2.5 hours? Yeah.
At what point do you hear about Ambassador Stevens?
There was a DS agent up on the building with Jack and Scott
the
Wicklund,
Department of State agent.
and he got a phone call. And that's how we found out that he was at the hospital.
By 1 a.m., local looters and curiosity seekers have entered the consulate grounds and infiltrated the safe haven. 6 apparently good Samaritans come across an unresponsive man. They take him to the Benghazi Medical Center, where he's worked on for 45 minutes before being declared dead. They have Scott Wicklund's phone, which had been given to Ambassador Stevens during the attack. Calling Wicklund's stored numbers, someone gets to the American embassy in Tripoli and says a man has been found and he's dead. The caller provides a description matching Ambassador Chris Stevens.
There's a car pulls up and parks right here. A guy comes around from the side of the car, and he's reaching like he's throwing something. And right as he brings his arm back to throw, I engage him. I move and shoot him 2 to 3 times. He goes down, and whatever he threw landed just short of our back gate and exploded, which then engaged. Again, it was
The signal.
the signal.
And this was bigger. I mean, it was a larger force coming through. I mean, there was, I'd say, between 20 cars.
And again, we just started engaging the threats as they appeared and taking them out.
They were like ducks in a row at a shooting gallery, hitting one guy in the head and dropping.
But it's like bursts of fire.
But it's not.
They were kind of spraying. I mean, they were just constantly spraying.
We are doing control bursts. You aim, you shoot. You aim, you shoot. It's not the movies. You don't flip it on fully auto and you go after it, because you can't hit anything. You're aiming a single shot, and you're shooting, shooting, shooting until they turn tail and run.
So far you've taken AK fire, you've taken RPGs.
Yep.
Are you worried that something heavier is coming?
Yes. After the second?
Second.
Yes.
You're waiting for a third.
Waiting for something bigger. During that second attack, that's when I actually finally got a chance to sit down. All you can think of is what was the last conversation that I had with my spouse or my kids? Was it good? Was it bad? And
What was yours?
It was good. You always want to make, especially overseas, you want to make that last conversation always good.
When was it?
It was the night before. So I knew I had spoken with them, and hey, that's it. Get them out your head. It's time for you to back on the job.
Roan had just come back up, and we'd been sitting up there talking, because we both had young kids.
Roan had extended, but he was looking forward to going.
Yeah, he was looking,
That was his
because
last trip.
he wanted to see getting to see his baby.
I had twins.
He had twins.
What's he telling you?
Every day and 2 or 3 times a day we would Skype and send photos and videos of the twins. Whenever I was expecting a phone call and didn't get one, that's when you start to worry a little bit.
All right, you guys good? We always emailed or talked on the phone, and he would always call around 3, 4 p.m. our time, always. And if he didn't, I knew ahead of time why he wasn't going to be able to call.
We'd talk every day, whenever time would allow, and most often the same time every day. If he didn't call me, you know, at the time he was supposed to call me, then, you know, I would begin to worry.
That's one of the reasons I'm fighting. It's one of the reasons I'm doing what I do. Not only for the people here, for the family back home, but primarily you're thinking about the team.
And that's your
And their family.
And that's
Their family, because their family, I mean, we're all family now. We're all brothers, and that's the way it is. And I mean, so you're thinking of this family here as much as that family there.
Most of the people are staged here in C.
I ended up on top of the command center in Building C, had with Roan at this point.
More cars come by. What happens then?
we don't know what they're doing. We didn't know if they were guys that lost or they were still trying to probe us.
And there's a guy with a cell phone.
Yeah, yeah. And he just walked up, cell phone, and walked back. Maybe he was getting GPS coordinates with his phone. Again, it's just another thing in Benghazi. It's eerie. I want to shoot him, but is he just some guy taking a walk? Weird things are still happening that night. We're trying to think that, all right, morale's up, we're out of this, we're good, we fought him off again. I was expecting, more cars. It was actually, the first convoy was quite small, but I was just, honestly, I was just happy to see him. 3 of the guys I'd worked with before, so I recognized them off the bat. And
including Glenn,
including
Doherty.
Bub, yeah.
Navy
Navy
SEAL,
SEAL, yeah.
connection with Roan, with Jack, and you had worked with
In fact, Bub and I had just done a trip in Tripoli before Benghazi. I just knew Bub from contracting.
Okay, so they come in, they go to Building C.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are still kind of waiting for what's happening.
The aircraft that they had wasn't big enough to take us all back. So they were going to take the non-shooting personnel and get them out.
To the airport.
Yes.
To the airport. We were going to stay there and hold the Alamo. And
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
Literally. And I think they'd probably been there about an hour. Me and Roan were talking about that, wondering, what's taking so long? Why aren't we getting out of here? The sun was starting to come up, but it was, we better be ready for another attack because this is when it's going to come. It was about that time that Glenn come up on the roof.
Climbed up the ladder?
And come over and was talking to Roan, and Roan had introduced me to Bub because I had never worked with him before. He says, yeah, Bub's a sniper. And I'm like, well, hopefully we ain't going to need you, but I'm glad to have another shooter up here. Bub turned and was walking back towards the front of the building, and almost immediately a mortar come in and landed on top of the wall right there.
What I heard it, and I didn't even know I heard it, it basically sounded like when a rocket goes off and this.
Small arms fire started coming from this direction. Roan had a machine gun, and he stood in probably like a 3/4 crouch position and just started laying down hate.
Laying hate. Yeah.
Down through this avenue of approach from here. I started to engage with him. I ran out of ammo, knelt down, changed magazines, and right as I'm coming up, and I start to re-engage, another mortar hits almost to the center of the building here. And that one, it knocked me back, and that's what hit Roan. Roan was standing to my left. I got knocked back, and as I stood back up, I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and he was in a fetal position in the corner right here. I stand up and try to re-engage with my rifle, and I bring my hand up, and from here down is hanging off at a 90-degree angle.
Your hand is just hanging, flop.
Yeah. I just keep trying to bring it up, and it won't stay. You can't make it work. And that's when the second round hit. That's when I saw Bub go down about right here. I wasn't sure if he was hit or if he was just taking cover. And then I turned back and again tried to engage and get my hand to come up, and a third round hits in the same vicinity. And at that point, I mean, I just felt like I got hit by stung by 1,000 bees just up and down my side. And I figure I better get to some cover now in case another one comes. And the whole night went quiet after that.
That's tough to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, just a little.
I bet.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's what has to be done. I mean, you're in a fight, you got to stay in the fight. That's the only thing I could think of is Roan's down. Somebody needs to continue firing.
And you see this mortar attack happen. What are you doing?
I'm still, I'm over here on Tower 3, still, you know, covering this area. To me, it looked like it hit like right around here. We had no cover for mortar attacks. I mean, even in the buildings, I'm surprised that one didn't collapse. Another explosion hits right here. When I heard another thump, that's when I jumped off the tower, moved back, and got somewhere right around here, and that's when the mortar hit. And once that mortar hit, it was pitch black and dead quiet. Jack came over and said, "Hey man, there's no movement," and that's when I sprinted to the ladder, and then I just kind of skiddied on up as fast as I could, jumped over the parapet, and that's when I saw Dave Ubin off to my left. Looked like somebody in the center, and then a couple other people maybe over here. But it was a lot of, the smoke was still up there from just the debris kind of settling down. And so I moved over to Dave. I find a tourniquet because Dave's leg was pretty much completely severed off. I think it was just barely hanging on by a thread, and same with his arm.
Some ligaments, yeah.
So got the tourniquets on him, called back on the radio, say, "Hey, I need help up here. You know, I need help." I heard noise, so I moved over to where the noise was, and
I was trying to get a tourniquet out, put on myself, and then I saw him.
Meanwhile, your hand is still flopped down.
Yeah. So I pulled out the tourniquet, and I was just trying to fix my arm. I just kept grabbing it, trying to put it back in place. And
he's just sitting there kind of going, "Hey, check this out," and his arm is, you know, it's just, I'm like, "Dude, you need to stop. You're going to make it worse."
Stop playing with it.
So I
was bored.
He got his tourniquet there, reached down, grabbed his tourniquet, threw it on him real quick, stood him up.
He asked me if I could get down or get over to the ladder, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have to, because I knew there was others that were down.
Meanwhile, you're pretty banged up.
Yeah, just a little bit. I got hit in the chest, up and down my side, got hit in the throat, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll have to. And so I hooked my top arm around the top rung of the ladder and just climbed over and was concentrating on just thinking, you know, if I fall now, I'm going to break my neck and die, and that's the last thing I want to do. So I'm just concentrating on getting my feet on that rung, and sure enough, I slipped, and luckily I had my arm, and I caught myself and pulled myself back up, and got down, and then was able to inch my way down the ladder.
After I got Oz up and moving, I went straight back to Roan. He was still in the fetal position. I rolled him over. There was no response. I ripped off his body armor and tried to, you know, got that off. Took a pulse. Couldn't feel nothing. Got the flashlight shining in his eyes. No pupil movements. Mm-hmm. No dilation. Put my ear to his chest and tried to see if his chest was going up and down, if I could hear a heartbeat. There was nothing. So I left him, went over to the other guy. So I did pretty much the same exact thing. Checked him, ripped off his body armor, and there was nothing.
Yeah.
When you realize they're dead, what do you do?
Well, and I just kind of said a prayer over both of them.
And the quote is, God watch over him, guide him to where he needs to be, take care of his family.
Mm-hmm. So after that, I kind of, the D boys the whole time, they just want to get everybody off the roof. And when I was doing the prayer, I just ignored them, It was like, gathered up everybody's weapons that was left.
You got to get the bodies off the roof. It's tough.
Mm-hmm.
The D boys picked the bodies up and dumped them over the side of the roof. Maybe that's not the right description, but they got them off the roof the most expedient manner, and by doing that, it was just throwing them over the edge of the roof to get them down. I just leave that to each person's decision on, whether right, wrong, indifferent, but I know that it's not something you want to see.
Turned on the news and there it was, 4 Americans had been dead and 2 were unidentified. And I'm like, he hasn't called me. I tried texting him, I tried calling him, began to cry and I just hit my knees and prayed.
In past experience, if I start panicking right away, then I just get myself worked up. So I just tried to not worry about it, and I thought, well, I'll hear from him in the morning or the next evening.
There was a ticker on the bottom of whatever news channel it was, and it said something to the effect that there was an attack on the annex in Benghazi. And my heart dropped, and I'm like, gosh, how am I going to tell the kids? And that was my first reaction.
Let me take you to when the bigger convoy arrives.
Yeah.
They finally get there. It's like 50 cars.
Yeah.
There's technicals, which are the big mounted machine guns.
Yeah, it was a mean convoy. Remember the first vehicle coming in, I had my gun on him. I had eyes on, right at his head. And I just reached my hand off with my offhand. And I went like this, and he reached out the car and did a big smile. And one thing that we've learned on these jobs is you have to know how to read people.
But is there a part of you guys that looked at that convoy and said, well, where was that?
Yeah.
Where was that before?
Yes, I did. I'm like, where the hell were these guys? Where were they?
Hours ago.
Exactly.
You get everybody mounted up. You're driving to the airport in this massive convoy, but still probably worried about attacks on the way.
Sure.
You get there, and there's another confrontation.
Between the militias, yeah. Our militia and then whoever militia was controlling the airport. And we were the bigger militia, so we got through.
You have a smaller airplane. It's not exactly big for everybody. Load you guys up. Or you walk on.
They started to pull me off, and I'm like, I walked into Benghazi, I'm going to walk out of here. And I get up, slide to the edge and stand up. There's still blood dripping down my arm, and because it was a private jet, there was a flight attendant, and her eyes just get as big as saucer plates, and she's laying towels down because she's worried about her boss's airplane getting messed up. And then they bring in Dave, and he was in and out of consciousness throughout the flight, and somewhere in between that, somebody's clearing their gun, their pistol.
In the plane.
Yeah.
In the plane, and a round goes off. And the pilot is, he wasn't going to take off till they could confirm that whether or not the fuselage had been breached.
But they figured it out.
It had lodged against one of the seat posts and didn't penetrate anything.
Dave Ubben, he was bleeding out. If there was another delay,
He probably wouldn't have made it because he was down to about as much blood as a person could lose before they die.
you're taking off in the plane. The rest of you guys
Yep.
are going to wait for the next plane.
Yes.
With the bodies and
Yes.
then eventually the body of Ambassador Stevens.
Yes.
I didn't answer it on the first ring. It rang a couple times because I wasn't sure who it was going to be. If it was going to be him or if it was going to be some, you know, representative informing me of what had happened. I took a deep breath and I listened and I just said, okay, and I love you. And I probably didn't sleep much that night.
It was really brief. He just said, I'm okay, everything is okay, and click, he hung up. So it was super quick.
Finally, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. A nurse from Lunstall had called and said that he had arrived there, and so I was just like I could breathe. And just thank God.
Would you do it all over again?
Yes.
Definitely. I'd be there.
That's just the way we are.
We run to it. We're not running away from it.
How often do you get back to this 13 hours? Do you think about it a lot?
Every day you think about it. There ain't a day that you don't.
I mean, I'm reminded of it every time I go to grab something.
Where's your hand?
Yeah, because I still don't have full use of it. Probably never will have full use of it. I mean, but, so it is a reminder, but it reminds me of the honor of fighting with guys like Tig and Tonto and Roan and Bub and Jack and DB. Very few times in your life will you get to form a bond like this, and most of the time it's done in situations that suck. But you know, I wouldn't give it up.
When you see all of the back and forth that has happened over the past roughly 2 years, what do you think about all the political battle and that sort of thing?
You can't get it wrapped up in, because we're not politicians. You know, we're contractors, we're soldiers, we were Marines, Rangers. We still are. You know, we'll always be. So leave that to the politicians. I can't speak for why a politician did this or why a politician did that. All I can speak for is what we went through that night and what happened.
If I gave you that 30 minutes back and I gave you some air power, would Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith be alive today?
Yes, to me, if without the delay, they would still be alive. My gut is yes.
You in on that?
I'd strongly believe if we'd have left immediately, they'd still be alive today.
I think there's a lot of things could have been different. I mean, air power, if we had some air support, if they'd have sent somebody in.
The Spectre, in my opinion, can see heat signatures, and you know,
They would have been able to see the mortar team.
they would have been able to see the mortar team setting up.
Which means that Roan and Bub would be alive.
Would it have improved our chances? Oh, heck yeah.
Okay, there you have it. I promised you that you'd see the rest of that. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important, as you probably have already concluded, because our government has been lying to us for over 2 years. Most of us know that. You and I, as average citizens, don't have the proof yet. We have to rely upon the people who have been elected and sent to Washington. Darrell Isis and Gowdy from Georgia, I think it is, are doing a grand job of trying to get to the truth. But it all goes back to a statement that was made by the future would-be president of this United States, who at the time was Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. And I quote, "With all due respect, And you know, anytime somebody says, with all due respect, they're saying one of two things. They have no respect for you, or it's perfunctory, they have to say this. With all due respect, the fact is we have 4 dead Americans. Was it because of guys out for a walk one night decided to go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? This is the woman who would be president, and she still doesn't get it. And I remember, as you probably remember, seeing her at the airport with the families as they brought in those caskets with her crocodile tears and her still talking about that video, the video that had inflamed the Muslims and made them do this terrible deed. And it took over a year to get them to stop using, well, they still used it. Susan Rice went on television, 4 interviews, at least 4 interviews, kept talking the video line. John Kerry kept talking the video line. There was never any video. Well, there was a video, but it had nothing to do with this. Now, the reason I show you this, you remember, it's been about a month ago now, when we had Kelly Megan on Fox News, Kelly's File, whatever it is, who interviewed Lieutenant General retired Tom McInerney, U.S. Air Force. When you see Tom on television, he has a very severe countenance. He's obviously angry. He's upset. He's probably disgusted. He's been there. He's done that. He understands the program. And it has to be just wrenching for him as a 3-star general to know what could be done and to see what has been done. But you remember he said, this was on the 3rd or the 4th of September, and he told Kelly, there's an important book coming out and there will be a very important news broadcast on September 7th, and that was a Saturday, as I recall. I believe it was the 13 Hours in Benghazi book. I just received my copy. I'm getting into it. I think I told you that. I hope you'll get it. If for no other reason, of course, get it so you can see what these men actually went through. Remember in the first episode, they told us they were told to stand down 3 times. They were told to stand down. Somebody had to tell them. And the buck supposedly stopped with Hillary Clinton, who has been busy running for her dear life because she wants to be president. And you can't be president if you accept responsibility for failed missions, whatever it is. So these men are telling what actually happened. Now, as a side note, I got an email from a friend of mine who is a contractor, just like these fellows. He is in, I would just say, someplace in the Middle East right now. And he knew these fellows, every one of them. And he said, Ralph, these guys are the real deal. Now, I've known him for nearly 40 years, and I know he's the real deal. And if he vouches for them, you can see for yourself, these guys are the real deal. Now, who are you going to believe? The State Department's Hillary Clinton, Obama, here's a casual salute to you Marines, I'm busy with my latte, or you're going to believe what you're seeing for yourself. All right. I've got another video for you, and I think, yeah, we have time to do that with a couple other things, but I wanted to share yesterday, the ISJ, the Idaho State Journal, ran an editorial opinion that I just had to deal with it. I had to speak to this. When I read it, I just immediately went to my computer and started addressing it. I'm going to share it with you. Now, it's not word for word, just because of the length of it. I had to take some of it and leave it out, but I connected the dots so that you get the gist of what it was. If you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you didn't read it, it may be news to you, but I think it's time. And you know, O'Donnell wrote an article recently, and I've got it here, that the Idaho State Journal does have an agenda. Then he does a tap dance about what the agenda is, and it gives you a war story about when he was a kid in college and the old salt that he worked under, and so on and so forth. The agenda, whatever you want to call it, the Idaho State Journal does not do investigative reporting unless they don't like you. They'll go after you if they don't like you, to a degree. But they're good at name calling. They're good at casting aspersions, but they're not too good at telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They would rather tell what they're told to tell, and hopefully it will make somebody happy. Well, here's what they wrote in yesterday's forum. That's the editorial opinion page of the paper. And I'm quoting, and as I said there, I've left out a little bit. I had to just because of the length of this. Pocatello is now home to over 2,000 Muslims, mostly students at Idaho State University. Muslims from places like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Africa are literally everywhere. They are in the process of opening a new mosque on South Fifth Avenue. But not everyone in the Pocatello area is accepting of the Muslims around us. This was exemplified by some of the dozens of Facebook comments about a story in Sunday's Journal on Pocatello's growing Muslim population and the pending completion of the new mosque. One of the comments read, "They need to go back where they came from." Another person said about the new mosque, Give it time, ugly will spew from this place of worship. Another individual added about the mosque issue, I don't like the fact that we have one here. It makes me feel unsafe after 9/11. I lost family and friends in a war we shouldn't have to fight. Next, we won't be able to display our American flags here like everywhere else because it's offensive to Muslims. It's clear that a sizable group of locals have negative feelings about the Muslims among us. Part of the reason is because Muslims have committed deadly acts of terrorism. About 3,000 Americans died on 9/11. That was the first 9/11. Muslim terrorists were behind the assault on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, and it's impossible to watch cable TV news without hearing something about the atrocities committed against some Muslims and Christians by the terrorist group ISIS, or ISIL if you're the Lati man in charge. But the reality that non-Muslims must understand is that most Muslims hate and fear Islamic terrorists as much, if not more, than the local folks who express fear about Islam do. Prepositional phrase, I wasn't going to put that in. Islam is a religion that's been hijacked by those who want to twist it to justify evil acts, such as beheadings, mass executions, and brutalizing girls from school. And now here's where I differ the first time. There has been no hijacking of Islam. Surah 8:12 states, strike off their heads, strike off the very tips of their fingers. Surah after surah, those are the chapters if you will, commands the killing of everyone who does not submit, or Islam, to Allah. Children, women, old men, so-called apostates, everyone. Islamic hardliners in Pakistan were so opposed to the education of women that in one tumultuous day in 2004 they burned down 8 girls' schools. It could be said there's a civil war going on in Islam today, and unfortunately most of the publicity about the faith highlights the atrocities of groups like ISIS. Well, yeah, they do highlight that, but really that just brings more into light what's been going on for a long time. The so-called civil war has been going on for nearly 1,000 years, centuries, and it has to do with who is the real successor to Muhammad. In essence, it's a family feud mainly between the Sunnis and the Shia. Islam is Sunni. Now that's important. A couple of things need to happen to remedy this situation. First, the majority of Muslims worldwide who don't believe in inflicting harm on people in the name of their faith need to have a louder voice. Too often Muslims let the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban do their talking for them. That needs to change. Muslims need to take a stand and tell the world that these terrorist groups who kill and injure people in the name of Islam are not real Muslims. Oh, but they are real Muslims. Extremists, yes, but real Muslims nonetheless. These terrorists are bad people using religion to push a violent, extreme agenda. Secondly, Americans need to put their best foot forward with the Muslims around us, especially here in Pocatello. And I would put a question mark after that. The Islamic faith is embattled right now, but that doesn't mean Americans need to be rude or say that all Muslims are terrorists. The Muslims who live in Pocatello are not terrorists. And there's a footnote here. Now, when I talked to you several weeks ago about some 800 to 1,000 students at ISU, and then I was corrected by Mike O'Donnell in one of his subsequent articles. I think he said there were 856. I had no idea there were 2,000, but of the 2,000 Muslims in Pocatello, most are transitory. They're students. Only time will tell whether there are terrorists among them. And I might add that most of those are from Saudi Arabia. Wahhabism, which is the genesis for ISIS, they are brother and sister or brother and brother. There is a constant genetic link between these. All started with Saudi Arabians. The Saudis have spent millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in this country, and we've allowed them to put in their madrasas to teach Muslims to hate everything that is not Muslim. Make no mistake, if there are 2,000 Muslims attending our university, somewhere in there is going to be somebody who is tainted with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, one of those extremist groups. You won't see them until they run the airplane into the 147-story building or whatever it is. But there's some, and if only a quarter of those 2,000 are from Saudi Arabia, they have been taught from birth to hate anything that's not Muslim. Of the 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet, all acted on extreme views. If they all acted on extreme views, the world would be in flames right now. It has been estimated, and this is my note, not there, it has been estimated that only 10% of the world's population of Muslims is extreme. Remember, that's 1.6 billion. That's still about 160 million, at 10%. Oh yes, did the ISJ notice that the world is in flames? Europe is nearly Islamicized. Riots and terror are daily occurrences in such places as France, Belgium, Holland, Uganda, Britain, Iraq, Israel, Syria, just to name a few. Americans have long prided themselves on their tolerance of people of other faiths, and we all have rights in the U.S. to practice whatever religion we choose to embrace. It's a constitutional guarantee ahead of the right to bear arms. That's how the Founding Fathers set it up in the First Amendment to the Constitution, and that's what separates the U.S. from many other places around the world. Here, freedom belongs to everyone. Now, here's a note that I would add to that. It must be reiterated that many Muslims who are enjoying our constitutional freedoms want to replace them with Sharia. Islam is not just a religion. It is an entirely self-contained religion, government, judiciary, and educational system that does not tolerate any other religion, government, judiciary, or system of education. The Idaho State Journal might print more than just the propaganda being pushed by Muslims from this or any other community. The ISJ owes it to its readers to print the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, no matter how bad it may taste, rather than the politically correct fable of tolerance from Islam. I don't know who wrote that. You know, they don't tell you who's in the editorial staff, and that changes from time to time, but, well, you can draw your own conclusions. All right. We have a little bit of time left, so I have another piece here. Now, this is a fellow named David Wood. I just came across David Wood recently, and he teaches about Islam from a perspective that I'm sure a lot of Muslims, if not most Muslims, won't like. Teaches with a little bit of humor, but what he's teaching is straight up. And it's a lot easier when you listen to him talk about it. Things start to fall into place. So I'm going to share this with you. It's called the Top 10 List of essential items that non-Muslims have to know. Are we good to go? All right, let's watch this, please.
If you really want to understand the rape and slaughter being committed in the name of Allah by the Islamic State, you have to study the history of Muhammad and his companions, a history found in the Hadith and the Sirah literature. But you can get a pretty good outline of the Islamic State's message and tactics by reading the Qur'an, which Muslims believe to be the direct word of Allah. For those of you who don't have time to read the Qur'an, here's a top 10 list of the most essential verses for understanding ISIS. In the Bible, Jesus says that God loves everyone. In the Qur'an, not so much. Surah 3, verse 32. Say, obey Allah and the Apostle, but if they turn back, then surely Allah does not love the unbelievers. According to the Quran, Allah only loves obedient Muslims. I wonder why ISIS doesn't seem to have much love for non-Muslims. Believe it or not, Allah's complete lack of love for non-Muslims plays a role in how non-Muslims are to be treated. Surah 48, verse 29. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against unbelievers and merciful among themselves. Those who are with Muhammad, i.e. Muslims, are severe against whom? Against unbelievers. They're merciful to whom? Only to their fellow Muslims. But politicians and the media just can't figure out why ISIS is so severe against non-Muslims. There are lots of ways to be severe against unbelievers. Here's one, Surah 4, verse 24. Also forbidden are women already married, except those captives and slaves whom your right hands possess. This may be confusing without the historical context, which you can read in Sunan Abu Dawud 2150. When Muhammad won the Battle of Autas, Allah had already revealed that Muslims were free to rape their female captives. But at Autas, the Muslim army captured certain women along with their husbands, and some of the Muslims started wondering if raping these women counted as adultery, because they were married. That's when Allah revealed Surah 4, verse 24, which says that married women are indeed forbidden as sex partners unless they're your captives. If they're your captives, rape them all you want. Allah couldn't conceivably care less that they're married. Heard about any groups raping their female captives recently? What about people who try to stop the Islamic State from establishing Sharia? Surah 5, verse 33. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Apostle and strive to make mischief in the land is only this, that they should be murdered or crucified, or their hands and their feet should be cut off on opposite sides, or they should be imprisoned. This shall be as a disgrace for them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have a grievous chastisement. Notice that there are several penalties, including death, crucifixion, and dismemberment, for the vague crime of making mischief in the land. Since the crime is vague, Muslim groups like ISIS can pack all kinds of offenses into this verse. And yet the U.S. State Department just put out a video making fun of ISIS for crucifying their enemies. When Muhammad was completely outnumbered, he had to put up with idolaters. But once he had the most powerful army in Arabia, the message of Islam became convert or die. Surah 9 verse 5 contains Allah's final marching orders on dealing with idolaters. When the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive, and besiege them, and prepare for them each ambush. But if they repent and establish worship and pay the poor due, then leave their way free. Lo, Allah is forgiving, merciful. So kill them unless they convert to Islam. Sound familiar? Since idolaters have to convert or die, you might be wondering why ISIS gives Christians a third option, the option of paying jizya, tribute money. Surah 9, verse 29. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book. The people of the book are Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So the benefit of being a Jew or a Christian, according to Allah, is that you won't necessarily be slaughtered for refusing to convert. You have the option of paying tribute money to Muslims in acknowledgement of your inferiority. Is it just me, or is ISIS following the Qur'an to the letter? But ISIS doesn't just attack unbelievers. Muslims are also targeted. Why is that? Surah 9, verse 73. O Prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites, and be unyielding to them, and their abode is hell, and evil is the destination. The Arabic for strive hard here is a form of the word jihad, so Muslims are commanded to wage jihad not only against unbelievers, but also against hypocrites, people who claim to be Muslims but aren't doing what Allah tells them to do. The penalty for hypocrisy can vary depending on the severity of the hypocrisy, but when Muslims deviate from core Islamic doctrine, they find themselves in the apostate category, and the penalty for apostasy is death. So when ISIS kills Muslims who aren't adhering to central Muslim doctrines, they're just doing what Allah commands. But what about all the peaceful, westernized Muslims who condemn killing in the name of Allah? Sadly, Islam isn't defined by westernized Muslims. It's defined by Allah, who says in Surah 9, verse 111, Surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. Allah defines believers as those who slay and get slain. They keep killing until they get killed. Doesn't sound much like our peaceful Muslim neighbors, but it sounds an awful lot like ISIS. Muslims are only allowed to seek peace when they aren't in a position to violently subjugate their enemies. Allah says in Surah 47, verse 35, Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace, when you should be uppermost, for Allah is with you and will never put you in loss for your good deeds. When the Muslim community is strong enough to slay the idolaters and to subjugate the Jews and Christians and to fight the hypocrites, peace is not an option. If you seek peace when you should be uppermost, you won't have much ground to stand on when ISIS knocks on your door and tells you that you're a hypocrite. This final verse might seem out of place because it's not about rape or slaughter, but you can't really understand how the verses about rape and slaughter fit into Islam as a whole without understanding Surah 2, verse 106. Whatever communications we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things? People in the West have been trying to condemn the Islamic State by quoting peaceful verses of the Quran. How can you guys call yourselves Muslims when the Quran says there's no compulsion in religion? But those peaceful verses were revealed before Allah commanded his followers to slay idolaters and to subjugate Jews and Christians and to fight hypocrites. So the most important verse you need to know if you want to understand the Islamic State is Surah 2, verse 106, which lays out the doctrine of abrogation. Earlier verses get abrogated or canceled by later verses, which means that versions of Islam that oppose the sort of violence being committed by the Islamic State are now obsolete.
So Josh, let's go all the way down to number 8 on there. We may not be able to finish the whole thing. The clock here is not in sync with the other clock, so I'm not sure which one is which. I just want to remember that doctrine of abrogation. That is very important. I want to wish you a very happy Rosh Hashanah. God bless you and yours. I hope boy, that clock changed fast. Hope we see you again next Wednesday. Oh, we're not going to be able to do that. All right. Well, we'll try to do this next week then. I was going to try to leave you on a positive note, but it's a great piece. It's only 4.5 minutes long. Did you see on television recently where the United States Air Force Academy has now, in their swearing-in ceremony at the end of the graduation, when the officers are sworn in as new officers, the Academy has kowtowed to some radical leftist group that doesn't like the word God being in the oath. And so the Academy has taken the word God out of the oath for all of the new officers in the Air Force, which should kind of scare you and me, because we're not talking about Allah, we're talking about God. And God is the name in which we go forward against those who would destroy us. This film that I promise you will see it next week because it is uplifting. It shows a bunch of young Marines in a worship service, and they're singing a song. It's what we would call contemporary Christian music. It is so exciting to see all these young Marines are really getting into this song, and periodically it says that you're supposed to shout, and they give a big oorah. So next week we will try to give all of you a big oorah. Hope you got a chance to see the Marine Corps Band while they were here at the Performing Arts Theater. Great show, packed house. There were a few empty seats, and those are probably people that just couldn't make it in time, but watch them when they come around next time. Watch for the Air Force Band. They should be coming around again. If we don't get a chance to do this next week, well, we will get a chance to do this. We're going to continue with your education. We all need to know what we're up against, because we are up against a hardline enemy who wants only our death. They don't want us even to subjugate. They want us dead. And fortunately, Obama's generals and admirals are making some decisions that even he has to live with. So God bless them. Pray for our servicemen. Remember to pray for our nation. Pray for the good and the blessings for Israel. When you kiss your family goodnight, remember that they live in a world that's safe, because rough men stand watch against those who would do us evil. And those rough men are willing to do violence for us. God bless you and yours. Have a very happy Rosh Hashanah. We will see you next Wednesday. Good night.